Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called For Want of a Taco, written by In Yellow Clad. The planet Kavaistia, a home of the Kalori, is a pre-spaceflight world, and as such, is off limits to all star nations. The only thing allowed near their planet were observation posts, built by one scientific organization or another to study the primitive inhabitants. Of course, ships did pass through the system, but gave the planet a very wide berth, so as to not disrupt anything. To the planet below, life proceeded normally. They were well into their industrial era of their society, and while many speculated as to the potential for life outside their planet, it was merely the stuff of science fiction to them. Nobody had really looked up at the sky with anything more powerful than their eyes yet. Though, if they had, they would have seen nothing up there save the stars, as the rest of the galaxy had erected a complex series of holographic emitters that would edit out anything that wasn't supposed to be seen. Like space stations and starships, they would be able to see every star, every planet, and every moon in the solar system, without threat of contamination. Or so the rest of the galaxy thought. It was a fine spring day on Kavestia, and the communal park at the center of one of their larger cities was bustling with activities. Families playing or seeing the sights, lovers having picnics, and pet owners letting their furry or scaly companions have some fun in the sun. This would be the setting for something miraculous, though they didn't know it yet. A sudden booming sound from above drew the attention of everyone in the park and the city itself, as the black shape streaked out of the clouds and began to spiral in a controlled manner. Many eyes were focused on it as the shape slowed down with every twist it made through the air, till finally it was close enough for them to properly see. It was some manner of aircraft, they could tell that much, but it was not one of theirs. In fact, the means of propulsion were not clear at all, nor was its construction, and when it finally stopped midair, they knew that it was not on their world. Parents clutched their children tight in their tentacles, eye stalks shortened, and stared as the craft lowered itself gently to the ground and the engines began to spool down. The park held its collective breath as a hiss emanated from the back, a ramp lowering, and from within the craft stepped forth a being that they had never knew existed. Bipedal, no tentacles, and some sort of suit that hid the rest of their body features from their gaze. By far the most disconcerting thing about this creature was a featureless helmet, the glare shield masking its face entirely. It looked around, rolled its shoulders, and then checked something on the wrist computer before marching off in one particular direction. Many of the braver Kalori followed at a safe distance, their curiosity piqued. The being's destination became quite apparent when it stopped at a food truck, the cooks inside flattening themselves against the wall opposite and quivering with fear. Yet the being did not seek to harm them. Instead, its head, or what they all assumed to be its head, tilted backwards to peer up at the menu, which had many different pictures on it. It seemed to be deliberating with itself, and finally pointed at a menu item, a Clickitron. It was a wrap filled with many savory meats and other goodies, and popular dish amongst the Kalori. The lead cook, the one that typically took the orders, extended an eye stalk and peered up at what the being was pointing to, before quietly ushering his fellow cooks into motion. The alien patted itself down, no doubt looking for payment, and carefully placed a chunk of unrefined metal upon the counter. It glittered in a manner that suggested only one thing: Keppa, or gold, as the Kalori would discover it was called, a most valuable mineral, and the junk that had been placed before the cook was valuable enough to not only buy the food truck, but several more as well. In under 5 minutes the food was ready, and it was shakingly held out to the alien, who took it with a muffled yet happy sound emanating from the helmet. It produced some sort of a device and waved it around before it beeped, and the screen went green. Then it pushed a button and a stick popped out at the top, which it poked against the food it had received. Once again, it beeped and turned green, and with that all watched in shock as the alien stowed the device and removed its helmet. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, only 2 eyes, some sort of protrusion from the middle of the face, and an orifice that was presumably for the consumption of food or speech. It also had some sort of furry mane atop its head, which looked cared for, but a bit messy. The alien raised the Clickitron and opened that orifice, revealing a set of upper and lower teeth as it bit into the food. It promptly made a groaning sound that many assumed was delight and thrust out an appendage, while sticking the shortest grasping digit into the air while coding the others. And then it turned and ambled back towards its craft, all the while consuming the food it had purchased. The ram closed, the engine started up, and the craft slowly rose into the air, before zipping away towards the clouds. Many Kalori were trying to comprehend what exactly just happened. Others had filmed it on all their personal devices, which were the equivalent of the 21st century cell phones. And then, chaos erupted. Eduardo Ribeiro hummed happily as he chewed his way through the delicious treat he'd snagged, heading back to the much larger ship he originated from. He was just a low-ranking officer on a merchant ship, one that had been in the system to deliver supplies to one of the research outposts. The comms chimed, and he opened the line, the squid-like face of a boss appearing as the hollow over the main console.
"Ribeiro, do you have any idea what you just done?"
The Plexi yelled, his facial tentacles contracting and wiggling with distress.
"Relax, boss. What seems to be the problem?"
Eduardo said, a content drawl to his voice. Between the taco thing and the Aldradani weed he'd taken earlier, he was a very content man.
"What's the problem? The problem is you broke planetary quarantine and initiated first contact with a species that hasn't even left their atmosphere yet. That's a flaking problem."
Eduardo frowned, his brow furrowing deeply as he thought about it, but he was too chilled out to really see the problem, and so he eventually shrugged.
Sorry, boss. I was hankering for a taco, and nobody makes them good around here,"
he explained. The realization of what exactly he'd done would hit later, once he was sober. There was silence on the line for a moment as the Plexi captain just stared at him in disbelief.
You did that for a taco, for food I don't...
What? The captain said before burying his face in his hands. "We're going to jail. I just know it." Eduardo sighed, shaking his head.
"Sorry, boss. I really am,"
he said, before the line was cut. It struck him then just how massively he fecked up, and he hoped that perhaps all would turn out okay. He had the computer link him into the Kalori internet and discovered videos and images of him were already going viral. Oops. And so first contact was made, all for the want of a good taco. End of story. Story number 2. The Way They Love, written by InBabylonTheyWept. The first time you realized there was something strange about the new hire was when you learned his age. In your defense, it's never been easy to guess the age of an alien. The wrinkles on the Tyrolean might smooth out over time, while for a human, they arrive piecemeal. Apparently, they don't get their full set until well past their first century, and it's rare for one to make it past their second. So they were a young species, and this one in particular was basically a child. Smooth as flimsy, younger than your own youngest. It was rare for someone in engineering to be below 70, but from what you'd heard, this one was in his 30s. It stood out to you, not so much that you spent long moments thinking about it, but enough that it caught your attention, enough that you kept looking. The second time you realized there was something strange about the new hire was when you mentioned the latest ship to get lost mid-voyage. He looked up at you with those disturbing, forward-facing eyes, predator's eyes, and you saw something like dread shine out. A strange dread, though, not one you recognized. Not a self-preservation, but something deeper and harder and far more desperate. Then he rambled off some more details about it than you knew yourself. The ship's number, the crew, the last maintenance it had, the most likely cause of failure, improper upkeep of the cooling fins. Afterwards, he did this every time there was an accident. It was like he'd been waiting for you to bring it up, and now that you had, he could finally share this secret obsession with you. It worried you sometimes. This was clearly something lost in the abyss that he couldn't help gazing after. But even then, you knew better than to ask. You didn't mean to find the third realization. You'd stopped by his workstation to ask him a question about the B-dot in the ship's Klystron messenger. He'd left his computer open, and more importantly, his browsing data. You didn't have to search it to see the ship that he'd been looking at. It was a standard freight hauler, carrying ice back and forth between stations back in the Sol system. You saw the repair history for the ship at that moment, and it still didn't click. Improvements to the hull, upgrades on the P-dot sensor, a full rework of the cooling fins. It wasn't until a few days later, when you found yourself looking up at the same ship again, scratching at the mild curiosity, that you connected the dots. The service history, the repairs, the destinations, those were all red herrings. It was the face of that ship's captain that you'd recognized, the same face as your co-workers, but somehow even younger, lighter, shining and joyful and weightless. Family. You kept it secret because it felt secret, but you never forgot. Long after that job, long after the ship was slag waiting to be recycled, you still remember that final epiphany. And perhaps, more importantly, you remember that desperate, dreadful look back when you mentioned the first lost ship. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnold, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azricol. Thank you very much.